Hi everyone, welcome to week 25 here on our 2025 Chronological Bible-in-a-Year Reading Challenge. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, well done for joining me, and I trust this tutorial is helpful as we continue to read through the Bible story as more or less in a chronological format. It's not a precise science. There's a little bit of toing or froing as we go, but I hope that you appreciate something more of the Bible's big story as you're undergoing this challenge. Well done for getting this far. Well, as you know, in the last couple of weeks, we've been focusing in on the destruction of the northern kingdom of Israel. Okay, God's people are split, as you know, into two kingdoms, south and north, also known as Samaria, the capital city, or Ephraim, which is the majority tribe in that area. Well, the northern kingdom of Israel has been taken away and destroyed by the mighty Assyrian army. This has been foretold by a number of prophets, including Isaiah, Micah, Amos, and last week Hosea, with his marriage metaphor. And historically, we know that this happened in the year 722 BC. Okay, so that's around about in human history, the era of time we're looking at. This week, we'll be reading from basically 700 to 600 BC. Okay, that's around about the period of history that we are in. As we head back to Kings and Chronicles this week, we're going to read the rest of Isaiah, so well done for finishing him off. We're going to have a look at a little prophetic book called Nahum, all right, and also read a few Psalms. So 4 major components to our readings this week. Let's have a look at the narrative first in Kings and Chronicles. Basically, what we're going to do this week is our narrative there revisits the very narrow escape, the very miraculous escape, by the way, of Jerusalem when Assyria, after destroying the north, came down to Judah and threatened Jerusalem. Now, we revisit that story because you may remember we read about that last week in Isaiah. Okay, so Isaiah has jumped ahead a little bit in the narrative, so we're now taking a bit of a step back in Kings and Chronicles and revisiting that same story as told by those two authors. Okay, now fortunately, this threat against Jerusalem happened while there was a good king in charge at the time, King Hezekiah, who does the right thing. He cries out to God for help. He seeks the Lord, and thanks to his prayers and thanks to Isaiah's prophecy, basically a supernatural deliverance takes place, and Assyria backs off. King Sennacherib, I think is how you pronounce it, he basically backs off and disappears. However, as good a king as Hezekiah might have been, he also made a bit of a foolish mistake, and some guys from Babylon, which is an even further kingdom away north, a growing and developing kingdom in behind the scenes, okay? An envoy of their guys came knocking on his door and said, "Oh, g'day, we just wanted to say hello, we're in the neighborhood." Well, Hezekiah welcomes them in, shows them his palace, shows them his temple. Isaiah looks at this and goes, "What are you doing? These are the very same people who at some point in the future will take Jerusalem out." All right, so Jerusalem may have been spared from the Assyrian army, but at some point in the future, Isaiah says, Babylon is going to come and destroy this group. All right, well, that doesn't happen for a while, so let's not jump ahead of ourselves. Meanwhile, this week, Judah has plenty of other issues to deal with, including the reign of a horrible king called Manasseh. Okay, he basically rules in Judah and Jerusalem for about 55 years, so quite a significant leader, and he introduces all kinds of idolatry. He erects altars in the temple itself. There's child sacrifice. He sheds innocent blood. There's a whole lot of bad stuff that happens with King Manasseh. And as you read his story this week, what you're going to find is there's quite a difference in the way that Kings and Chronicles tells his story. And I think I've explained this before. Kings generally focuses on the raw and the real and the rugged. Okay, it's very as it happened, as it is. It doesn't hold anything back, and all the bad stuff is recorded in Kings, whereas Chronicles tends to put a positive twist on things because it's just written for a different purpose. Okay, and you definitely notice that with King Manasseh this week. As far as Kings goes, Manasseh was all bad. Okay, he was terrible. Everything about him was evil. But as you read his story in Chronicles, it brings up a part of his story we would never have known, that later in his life, Manasseh actually repents, turns to God and turns back to God and starts making things right in the days before his death. All right, this week I was speaking at Bayside Church. I did a Wednesday night seminar with them about hermeneutics, how to read the Bible. I spoke from my book, You Can Handle the Truth. And the lesson I brought there was about the importance of comparing Scripture with Scripture. Before you reach a conclusion on something, make sure if a particular story is told in one part of the Bible, compare it with how it is told in the other. Okay, the Gospels are a great example of this. You read a story of Jesus, compare Matthew's account with Luke's, and you get a slightly different take on the story. Well, we definitely get that this week with King Manasseh. Read about him in the Kings, Book of Kings. Then as you read about him in Chronicles, you'll get a whole nother angle of his story we would never have known had the chronicler not recorded it. So a good lesson there as to why we have two books. All right, so there you go. King Manasseh. Now, fortunately, as bad as he was and as much as he led Judah and Jerusalem into idol worship, he has a grandson after him who takes the throne called Josiah, and he becomes one of the greatest kings in Israel's history. He ushers in a great revival. He restores the temple. He breaks all the altars and burns them all and scatters their ashes. He gets rid of witches and spiritualists, okay? He has a massive Passover festival like it's never been celebrated since the days of Solomon. Josiah was a hugely significant leader leading a revival there in Jerusalem and Judah. However, as fantastic a leader as he is, the prophets still say to him, you know what, mate? In fact, it's a female prophet, by the way. A female prophet says to him, you know, Josiah, as good as a job you're doing, mate, as awesome as a king you are, your grandfather Manasseh was so bad that God is still going to see the destruction of Jerusalem take place as Isaiah and as other prophets in the past have told. So we kind of leave this week's readings on a high note with Josiah. Woohoo, he's amazing. But we also leave this week's readings with a sense of dread because we know at some point in Jerusalem, it's all going to go bad in the future. Something's going to go down. Babylon's going to have something to do with it. We know that is happening. All right, so we're going to find more about that next week when we read the book of Jeremiah. This week, in the second part of our reading, so that's the narrative. The second part of our reading is Isaiah. We're going to finish off Isaiah this week from chapter 49 to 66, basically our fourth and final week. We've seen a lot in Isaiah already. He's prophesied to the northern kingdom, he's prophesied to other kingdoms, he's prophesied down to Jerusalem and Judea. And one of the things that we noticed last week, if you're paying attention in Isaiah, is that he actually mentions three kingdoms or three world powers that will have a say in Jerusalem and Judah's history. The first was Assyria, and the time is prophesying, let's say 700 BC, around about there, that basically, we're being spared the destruction from Assyria. Babylon is the next kingdom that he says will take you out. But then he also mentions, thirdly, a guy called Cyrus. And this future king, Cyrus, at some point, okay, will be a shepherd, will be an instrument in God's hand to restore that which the Babylonians had destroyed. All right. So Isaiah, his scope of ministry, honestly, it's massive. He's prophesying, as we find out, hundreds of years into the future and gives us this picture of these three dominions, the current reign of the Assyrians, the future destruction that's going to be brought by Babylon, and then a future restoration with some guy called Cyrus. And that's where in the early 40s, chapter 40, 41, 42, around about that, in Isaiah, where it takes a real positive twist. You might have noticed that last week. The first part of Isaiah is pretty well doom and gloom, but then suddenly it gets all really positive. There's all good news, restoration and a future hope, all right? Why is that? It's because Isaiah knows this destruction is coming, but now he's promising a future restoration. Well, this week, as we close out the book of Isaiah, it's all good news. It's all in that era prophesying a future restoration that's going to take place. And with that restoration, as always, there's going to be a new king, a new shepherd that's going to lead God's people. Okay, apparently this leader is going to be a suffering servant, which is a little bit peculiar. There's a suffering servant who's going to give his life as a ransom for many. Well, that's a little bit odd. We don't really know what that is yet, do we? Okay, but Isaiah's prophesying that. And he's also prophesying a new Jerusalem in the future, a new covenant in the future, a new nation being born in a day in the future, a new heavens and earth in the future. Isaiah, all of these chapters, very, very positive. It's all poetry, it's all prophecy, and it's very, very positive as he's prophesying the future restoration. So I know you're going to love the end of Isaiah. If you struggle with the first half, at least you're going to like these last few chapters, because it's all very much feel-good chapters and a lot of stuff that will be familiar to you from the New Testament. All right, so well done for finishing Isaiah. The third thing we're going to be reading, the narrative, Isaiah. The third thing is a minor prophet called Nahum, who, unlike Isaiah, is not so positive. Okay, it's a very short book, like Obadiah and like Jonah, a very quick read, where Nahum prophesies not primarily to Judah. The main point of his ministry is to Nineveh, the Assyrians, who've just taken out the north, okay, the current world power. He's prophesying their destruction. So just read through that in one sitting. Again, it's a bit doom and gloom, but again, it's prophesying outside to an outside entity. So that's Nahum. Many of you have probably never read Nahum before. And the last portion of our readings are going to be 3 Psalms that we're going to read, which basically all tell about God's love for his city, Jerusalem, and how he cares and protects her. Okay, well, at least he protects her for now. For now, Jerusalem is spared for now. Next week, well, I don't want to ruin it for you, but next week things turn south. Okay, there you go. Guys, have enjoyed your readings this week. I'll catch you next week as we head into the book of Jeremiah. But all the best as you finish Isaiah this week and get stuck into your narrative. I think you're really going to love it.